You are here with By the Cover. Today we're going to be reviewing Micro by Michael Crichton and Richard Preston. This book was 424 pages and took me 2 days to read. I would rate this book a 7.5 out of 10. This review will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to hear those, click off now. So my likes in this book. Michael Crichton is one of my favorite authors, and I really like how he blends science fiction with thriller elements. He wrote my favorite book of all time, which is Sphere, but I haven't read anything from him in recent years, so this is my first visit back to his world. I personally love it when there's science talk in this book. I thought it was very digestible, and it's more like you're learning as it goes along, rather than just throwing a bunch of crap at you that you're not going to understand. I enjoyed all of that. I thought the fun factor of this book was incredible. It was fun all the way through the book. It had a varied cast of characters that were great in my opinion. The only one I really found cliche was Danny. I did think that aside from Karen, the female characters could have been developed a bit more, and I would have liked to have seen that. I really liked the chemistry between the characters. There was a lot of character growth and further development as they went through certain situations and had to deal with certain deaths. And I also liked seeing the reactions of the characters in certain situations that they had to deal with. The book had a strong emphasis on coming together as a team to solve problems. I loved anything to do with the natural environment. I thought the descriptions of the environment and the situations that the characters were put in were all fantastic. It was almost like a Survivor Man situation, except that the characters have to deal with a completely new set of things that matter during that situation. So for instance, things like rain, wind, the various bugs, the ones that you can see and the ones that you can't see with the naked eye, the changing body behaviors such as metabolism, various abilities, and the effect of mass versus the environment, and even things as trivial as dealing with shadows. I really liked the ingenuity of the characters as they worked their way through the environment. And there were just so many great scenes in this book. I'm not going to go into great detail, but things like the pollen scene, the ant scene, the beetle scene, the scene with the springtails, describing how the water was different, all of the nighttime scenes, and any scenes with wasps. The deaths felt like they had meaning in the moment, and it felt like they did affect the characters for a short time, but in this situation they're dealing with a survival situation, so they can't just dwell on the deaths for a long time. But you really see what toll that takes on them throughout the story. There were some twists I didn't see coming. I didn't think they were entirely necessary, but I did like them. And in retrospect, seeing as this came out in 2008, I thought the explanation of the why all of this was done was very plausible and applies a lot more today than it would have back then, given all the conflicts in the world. So I did like the why that explained why any of this was done by the corporation. A very small thing, but something I liked right off the bat was the beginning of the book has some detailed maps and also a summary of the science students and what each one is studying, which I found helpful. The pacing was very quick. There wasn't ever a time I was bored in the story. It had short chapters, an average of about 8 pages per chapter, which kept the plot moving along quickly and also gave you short digestible parts if you needed to put the book down. Overall, I did like the plot. So as far as my dislikes, there were pacing issues in this book, but for the first time since I've started reading, it was more a case of the pacing was too quick in some spots. It was never slow. The biggest example I can think of this, there's a part where Peter is confronting Vin Drake about his brother's death. Vin Drake pulls him into a room, has a conversation with him, starts beating Peter up. Then he goes out to where all the other students are, rallies them together, tells them they need to go to a safe room, which isn't a safe room. It's the room where they shrink people. So he takes the entire group of students to that room, shrinks them, and all of that happens within the course of 1.5 pages. And they are short pages. Another instance of this is when Peter is investigating his brother's disappearance. And it's like he has no emotional attachment to his brother at all. It's like he's immediately in Sherlock Holmes mode, and everything aligns. He knows which people to talk to, what questions to ask. There's no delay. He just goes from plot point to plot point and immediately figures out his brother's disappearance in the course of like a chapter. Another thing I didn't like about this book in some spots was the dialogue. It's almost like somebody took an outline of what the scene was supposed to be and just threw it in the book rather than going through and making making that outline more interesting and polishing it up and writing it well. It's almost like they just stuck the outline in there, because this book goes from some of the best vivid descriptions and great details to absolute NPC dialogue. You'll have dialogue that has great chemistry between characters, and then you'll have other dialogue that just seems like NPCs. And there's no chemistry, there's no details, it's just one thing after another, and no descriptions. Most of this bad dialogue takes place between the time that Peter is investigating his brother's death up to Allison's death, which is towards the beginning of the book. After that, it got significantly better. Another very weird dialogue choice that stood out to me right at the beginning of the book. It's a scene where Rodriguez goes to meet Fong, and Fong has a 20-year-old guy in with him that he refers to as a man, and then a paragraph later he refers to as a kid. Rodriguez comes in bleeding, and he's trying to talk to Fong, and Fong says, "You talk stink, man," like he's trying to avoid saying the word shit, right? Then the 20-year-old gets his throat cut open, unexpectedly, and Fong says, "Holy crap," again like he's trying to avoid saying shit. And then a paragraph later, Fong says, "This is a fucking mess." I don't understand that at all. I don't see why the first two lines were so unnaturally written. That part stood out like a sore thumb to me. Peter's entire investigation of his brother was very NPC-like, and I sensed no emotional connection to his brother at all, or the events that took place to him, which was very off-putting. And given what you see later in the book, it doesn't make sense with Peter's character. Vin Drake was also a very inconsistent character with dialogue, especially between the point of Peter investigating his brother's death up to the point of Allison's death, where he had some very NPC-like dialogue. The dialogue is inconsistent. Most of the bad stuff takes place at the beginning of the book, but it does get better later on. So my suggestion would be ignore the bad dialogue and just continue on with the story. It's not a large portion of the book, but there's enough of it to notice. The other thing that really bugs me is it's like, why would anyone believe Vin Drake? When Vin Drake beats up Peter and he's getting all of the kids to go to the safety room, it just seems completely unbelievable. And the point with Allison on the cliff, come on now. Ridiculous. This dude's obviously a swindler, and he should never be believed, clearly. The most unbelievable thing is how this story even takes place, because Vin Drake shrinks these people down. He has them in a bag, and I don't understand why he just wouldn't squish them right there. That would have been the end of the book. No reason he can't get rid of everything after the fact. There's no reason he shouldn't have done that. He just didn't. So I found that completely unbelievable. The other thing I didn't really like in the story was the plane sections towards the end. I thought that was a little out there. The ending, the actual actions of the ending, I didn't think was super great, but the outcomes of the ending are what I wanted to see. So how we got there wasn't great. I thought the outcomes were perfectly fine, and I did enjoy those. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. It's not without its flaws. I think the inconsistent pacing and some inconsistent dialogue are detrimental to the story. But overall, I really like the story. I really like the plot. I really like the concept and the subject matter. I like the characters in the book for the most part, and it was just an entertaining ride from beginning to end. So I give it 7.5. I really enjoyed it. That's about all I've got to say. Have a good one.